You've likely been in this situation so many times. You're done your meal, it's probably dinner time, and you find yourself wanting sweets. And you think, is there something wrong with me that every time I eat a meal, I want something sweet afterwards? Then you eat it and you feel guilty, and you just go through that same cycle over and over again, thinking that there's something wrong with you. Well, it turns out there's actually nothing wrong with you, and I'm going to be talking to you about 4 of the common reasons why you might be stuck in cycles of wanting something sweet after meals, and why addressing those 4 things will actually help you to sort out whether or not you actually want to be eating sweets, or if it's based on something else. And I imagine you're already thinking, I have tried a million things to stop eating sweets after meals. I've gone on X diet. I've been told to drink water, use distractions, eat a piece of fruit, go for a walk. The list goes on and on. I know your objections already, and I promise you that this video is not going to be that. This is not going to be advice about how you stop. This is going to be insight as to why you're likely craving sweets after meals and what you can do with that information as a result. But before we dive into things, let me introduce myself. My name is Catherine Metzler. I'm a registered dietitian, certified intuitive eating counselor, here to help you create peace with food and your body so that you can live a life with more freedom, presence, abundance, and joy.
You definitely want to take a listen to this.
You exist in a culture, a dieting culture that constantly demonizes sweets. Everywhere you look, there is something related to why you shouldn't be eating sugar, how you can cut it out. There's something wrong with you if you can't figure out how to cut out sweets. Honestly, it's endless. And it leaves us stuck in cycles of feeling like there's something wrong with us, or it leaves you feeling like there's something wrong with you if you're craving sweets. And this likely might be you right now. You might be feeling like, how do I get out of these cycles of eating sweets, and in particular, eating sweets after meals? It's a good question, and I'm not going to talk about all the diety ways to cut sweets out, because I personally don't believe that that's helpful and tends to lead to more binge eating and more obsession around sweets long term. Instead, I'm going to talk about the 4 reasons why you likely are craving sweets after meals, and then what you can do with that information. The first common reason why you might be craving sweets after meals is because you haven't eaten enough at mealtime. And I know you're probably already thinking, there is no way that I'm not eating enough at mealtime. It's something to consider, because it has been my experience in working with clients over time and existing in this world that a lot of people think that they're eating enough when in fact they're not. And of course, you and others think that way because we exist in a dieting culture that's constantly encouraging us to eat less and tells us that a normative amount of food is too much. So what happens is we get stuck in these cycles of not getting enough food, or enough food from certain food groups. Common ones are folks aren't getting enough carbohydrates because they're so demonized. And so we end up craving sweets because we haven't gotten enough energy at mealtime, and we seek to get that energy from sweets. A second reason is restriction of sweets. This is a very common experience when you are restricting foods, in this case, sweet foods. If you're finally exposed to them, then you can feel a sense of out of controlness. You can feel a sense of you need to have this at a certain time, no exceptions, feel really upset or disappointed when you don't have it. And that's because restriction creates this situation in which every time you have sweets, it feels like the last time you're gonna have it. And it's not usually conscious. You're not thinking, okay, this is the last time, but the feeling and experience often is, I'm not gonna eat more of this. I can only have X amount. This is the last time, et cetera, et cetera. So restriction is a super common cause. Not allowing yourself permission to have sweets can set up this reoccurring experience that every time you have a meal, it feels like you have to have something sweet. The third reason is that you are not feeling satisfied at meals. This can be a result of dieting and restricting food over time, but it can also just be a result of you existing in life and not necessarily providing or making satisfying meals for yourself. Your food might be bland, not very exciting. Your food might lack spices or flavors. You also might not be making food that you actually enjoy in the name of health, which then leads to us feeling dissatisfied at meals, which then can lead to us seeking satisfaction from sweets after the meal. If you have a meal that doesn't taste good and you weren't enjoying, of course you're gonna want sweets afterwards. That makes a ton of sense because the food in the meal wasn't very exciting. And the fourth reason is that you are not eating enough carbohydrates. We exist in a culture that demonizes carbohydrates. It tells us that they're bad for us, we should be cutting them out, we should be reducing them, and even if we are including them, we're still feeling guilty about having them when we're eating them. So if you're not having enough carbs, it's a super common experience to be done your meal and crave sweets because you haven't actually gotten your needs met. And it doesn't even mean in that meal. This can also be applied to that day or even the last 24 hours. If you haven't gotten enough carbohydrates to meet your body's needs, your body knows that sweets are a faster source of carbohydrate and you can get your needs met via getting sweets. So now that you know 4 common reasons, you can use that information and ask yourself if you are doing or experiencing any of those things. Are you restricting your sweet intake? Are you getting enough carbohydrates? Are you getting enough food at mealtime, and are you making satisfying meals? If the answer to any of those is no, that can be a place to start. If you are not getting enough carbohydrates, that can be a first place to start of including more carbohydrates into your diet as a way to understand more of what's going on with sweets after meals. If you are not making very satisfying meals, you might try to start there. What are some ways that you can start practicing making your meals more satisfying? I think with all of this though, one really important fact is that there's also nothing wrong with you having sweets after mealtime. And even after you sort out whether or not these 4 common reasons resonate with you, if you're experiencing them, what I really want you to know more than anything is that there's nothing wrong with you eating sweets after mealtime. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that you need to fix or change. It's okay to have sweets after every meal. It's okay to have sweets in your day. The tricky thing is when we get caught up in feeling like we have to, or once we start, we can't stop, or that we don't have any choice. That's what we're wanting to work towards, not you craving sweets after a meal. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's also nothing wrong with sweets. So in summary, I want you to get curious about what's happening with sweets without judgment. Take note of if anything that I named, those 4 common reasons, are happening for you, and then start to take steps to change them, to undo them, to add things in, to experiment with some of those things, all the while simultaneously working towards normalizing that there's nothing wrong with sweets. We need both of these combined in order to have a more peaceful relationship with sweets and to not feel like it's something we have to have after meals. So comment below, is this something that you've experienced in feeling like you have to have a sweet after a meal? What kinds of things have you been told to curb your sweet tooth afterwards? And is that different from what I'd offered? I'd love to hear. And while you're there, subscribe to my channel, like this video, and share it with other people in your life. And I'll see you back here next week.